everybody. Welcome back to the Ball and Breakfast podcast with Wayne. I'm Patrick. Covering the NFL draft tonight. We've got our return colleague here, Georgia correspondent Taylor Moss, in the house representing Top Rail Fence Company, as well as his Georgia Bulldogs, who made quite a splash here in this year's draft. So we're just going to go over, the draft itself, our winners, our losers. We talk about maybe some of our favorite picks of the night, favorite moments. I can't go any further without first turning it over to Wayne, who was actually in Kansas City representing B&B at the draft. Wayne, why don't you kick it off and just tell everybody how that whole experience went for you, how many days you were there, maybe the events, other things, and what was the environment really like out there?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I drove down there on Wednesday, actually. So I took the day off and went there Wednesday. And then Thursday, just had a good time. I actually worked at a WeWork and met a Bears fan. And I think we connected over there. He said he might be moving back to Chicago. And it was just a good time there. Gave me nice barbecue recommendations and, basically said, go to these places. He knew some of the event people in Kansas City. Unfortunately, if we arrived on Wednesday, we would have actually partaken in some festivities, but that didn't occur. But Kansas City, if you haven't been there, highly recommend going there. It's a great, I think, just small time feel with a little bit of a big city feel as well. Great barbecue scene. Went to Arthur Bryant, actually. They had some reporters there. And let me tell you, I've been to Texas, been to Carolina, some of the best barbecue, I think, in the country. So went there, and then the draft experience itself was really cool as well. It was right there at the World War I Museum. So on the second day of the draft, I actually got to go there a little bit earlier. I think the second and third round, right, started at about 6 o'clock and was able to see the World War I Museum, and then automatically, since right next to each other, just go towards the draft at 6 o'clock and see the second and third rounds there. But going back to the first day, it was just a lot of anticipation, a lot of talk, a lot of teenagers just running around going crazy, and then also like families as well. So had the 40-yard dash, which is hilarious. You saw mixtures of like kids going against each other as well as drunk adults racing each other back and forth. So things like that I thought was pretty cool. And then the draft itself was just nuts. I think there was just, again, like I mentioned, a lot of anticipation. And, I think the trades were the biggest things. That was so exciting to hear. All the trades that were happening, we can definitely speak about them more later. But, obviously Kansas City is a big football town, having also just won the Super Bowl. So a lot of excitement when Kelsey was there and showed, as well as Mahomes when they brought the trophy. So overall, a great time. Highly recommended if you're passing by or you got a conference there. It's definitely a great food and barbecue town, and everybody was really friendly too.
That sounds awesome. I was highly jealous just hearing you embark on that whole trip. Watching the draft, I was hoping I could maybe find you in the pack. Felt like for every single pick, there was like a fan base from that team, just in a group, in a crowd, just kind of representing and stuff. So hopefully you find yourself among some Bears fans out there. But with Kansas City, what would you say off the bat was your favorite barbecue item that you tried all weekend?
That's a great question. Definitely, there was brisket. I think you got to have brisket. It's the sauce. I think that's the one thing about Kansas City. Like, they talk about Texas barbecue. It's not much about the sauce. I think Carolina's a bit more of a vinaigrette, but this, I don't know, it's like a sweeter. I think it's sweeter maybe. But had a lot of flavor that just stood out. But yeah, definitely recommend Arthur Bryant. I think like they had a bunch of image photos on there with like Obama, a lot of presidents as well have been there, politicians, actors. So it's definitely a go-to place. you have to go a little bit out of the way from like the downtown area, but not too far. And there are a lot of locals that went there too. So.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I'll have to dig into that. I've had St. Louis barbecue, at least in that area, but never Kansas City's from the city itself. So I'll definitely have to try that. Without further ado, we will get into the NFL draft. We're going to kick it off first with teams that we thought were winners. I'm going to pass it over to Taylor to give us his winner, maybe talk about some of the prospects drafted and maybe how that would fit into the football team overall.
Yeah, we were talking about this briefly before. It's sometimes hard to pick winners and losers because you don't ever know till years down the road. Man, yeah, I think that and I'm actually torn on this because Houston, right? They had a really crappy season, but if you can go in and get who you think is your franchise quarterback, hopefully that he will be the guy for them, but you don't really know how that looks 3 or 4 years down the road. And a cornerstone on the defense, that's a huge draft. And when that trade happened, and I still kind of feel this way, right? That they traded back, I think it was 9 picks to get Will Anderson. And so they traded up 9 picks to get Will Anderson, but then they had to give up the 33rd pick overall, which is the best pick in the second round. They gave up another first rounder next year and a third rounder. I was like, damn, that's a lot. Will Anderson better be a stud because that's a lot of draft capital to give up. You move up 9 spots or something like that. I think it was that you give up, the 33rd, a first in the next year, and a third in the next year. But I'm sure if you're Houston, right, you're looking at that and you're like, we got the cornerstone on offense and defense. So to me, even if you give up a lot, I think that's a good situation to be in. Maybe pick them as a winner. I'm super biased on this pick, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but I just feel without going in depth, because I'm sure he'll ask me about it more later, I feel if you're Philly, you're already one of the most talented teams out there, and you can afford to take a little bit of a risk. If you think that Jalen Carter's a risk, well, some of those other teams really need to hit on the pick. If you're Philly, he's not even your starting D tackle in year 1. So you can take that risk, and if he doesn't pan out, you have a loaded roster. So there's this bit of the rich get richer. I'll probably go into that later, but I just feel there's loaded roster enabled them to take the best player on the board. Whereas if you have holes on your team, you have to fill your holes. For them, it was well, if we think he's the best player, we'll take him. If he pans out, great. If he doesn't, we're still good because we probably have the best roster in the NFL. So.
Well, I guess on that, let's start with Houston. Wayne, what do you make of Houston's draft? What Taylor just discussed, and how'd you feel about everything there?
Yeah, it's definitely that mixed feeling, I would say, similar to you, Taylor, because it's they got Anderson, but they paid basically a quarterback ransom for it, right? So, which I get in a way, because if you get the top edge rusher, right, then you're essentially that's in this day and age, that's kind of the quarterback of the defense in terms of value. Maybe not middle linebacker usually is, right, but in terms of their value, usually the edge rusher is the most valuable defensive player. So if they're looking at it that way, I guess it makes sense, but he has to pan out. He has to be a Hall of Famer, Pro Bowler, multiple Pro Bowls, right? So definitely a little bit of a reach, but at the same time, if he works out, I don't think we can argue too much against it. So
my only thought with it all is, yes, you probably got the best defender in the draft. Love the quarterback choice too. I think CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in this draft, just bar none. But I will say this reminded me a lot. And I think I told you this, Taylor, when we were texting back and forth about it, kind of in reaction, but it reminds me so much of the Chicago Bears going out and getting Khalil Mack at the time from the Raiders. Obviously, this wasn't a draft day trade for Khalil Mack as a rookie, but in the same sense, it was a place where the Chicago Bears were not locked and loaded. They weren't already in the playoffs. They weren't looking for that finishing piece, and they gave up a lot of draft capital to the Raiders to be able to, get Khalil Mack to be their next leader. And we had one really good season that got us a first round exit and a double doink kick by Cody Parkey. And after that point, we were middling, if not, below 500. And, we quickly had to reboot. So That's the only caution I'd throw out there for Houston. Any other team making that kind of trade when it's like, yes, you do acquire a complete stud, somebody who's probably going to be your future end for a while there. But in the same sense, when you're at the bottom of the pack and you need to assemble, 53 man plus roster like that, that's just pretty risky. So good luck to them. But overall, I thought obviously the top 2 picks were top talent.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that too, Pat, is I think that I don't know, the positive thing to getting a guy like Khalil Mack is he's proven, right? But the downside to that is you have to pay him too. You gave up all this draft capital and then you strap yourself with this huge cap number. If there is a benefit to going after a guy who's younger, right? It's like the teams that can do really well are the ones who get really solid players on their first contract, because particularly at the quarterback spot, because it just frees up so much cap room. Granted, Will Henderson hasn't played it down in the NFL, so your point is relevant for sure. But I think that in this case, maybe there's a slight benefit to saying, hey, we can get a guy who we think is going to be a stud. We don't have to pay him like a stud yet. But yeah, he hasn't proven anything yet. But I do think he has a high floor. It's just how high is that floor, right? Is it 10-year defensive starter? Because that's not enough for what you gave up. Or is it multi-Pro Bowler, like you mentioned, Wayne? But yeah.
And what do you think of that for Will Anderson? I mean, do you see every year Pro Bowl, maybe the top D end, one of the top D ends in the league for the next 5 years or so?
You want to go, Wayne, or you want me to go? I'm happy to answer. I don't know, man. I love Will Anderson's game because he's just one of those hustle guys, right? I worry a little bit. It's not that I think he didn't make plays against big teams, but some of the things where they're like, oh God, Will Anderson's amazing. It was well, that was Louisiana Monroe, right? Did you do it against Georgia? Did you do it against LSU? Because that's who you're playing against in the pros, right? And so I'm certainly not saying he completely didn't show up in those games, but I think felt like a lot of his highlights, he was that dude that was a grown man playing against boys. When he played against other teams that had players that were similar to him, I'm not saying he never stood out, but I don't think you looked at him as that guy where you were damn. And I'm biased on this, but there were games where I was Jalen Carter's damn, that guy's showing out. He is a man amongst boys. He's a man amongst grown men, right? And I think there's other guys where you look at, Bryce Young's the same way. When Bryce Young played talented teams, he stood out. I would actually argue Bryce Young stood out more without going down a whole nother path with that. So that's probably the one thing where I wonder about Will Anderson. Plus, I feel like my draft analysis gets skewed because you get these themes that get kind of perpetuated, right? One guy has his opinion, then everybody kind of runs with it to a certain degree. But it's funny, you look back in previous drafts, there's plenty of first round busts, but nobody's willing to stick their neck out and actually truly give their opinion, right? There's quarterbacks in this draft who I think are going to be horrible, but nobody really wants to say it right now. I think Anthony Richardson's a huge bust, if that's a whole other topic. But anyway, I think I'm a victim a little bit of the Will Anderson thing of oh, he's a can't miss type of guy. And I was I don't know if he's can't miss. I think he's he'll be a starter for a long time, but I don't know if I don't know. I'm interested to see. So.
Yeah. And I guess to go on that, I know there was a lot of talk about Darnell Wright, right? And how he kind of just blanketed Will Anderson. That's a good mention because you're talking about him going against the top level talent, and it's he's going to go against the first round right tackles throughout the NFL, and if he is not able to beat someone like Darnell, it's hard to say he's going to be beating up any of these other type of right tackles there. So, but I don't know. It's definitely a we'll see, but there's a lot of question marks, and they gave up a lot, I think, for Will Anderson.
For sure.
How about you, Wayne? Who was your winner in this draft?
Man, so obviously the Eagles. I think that's what everybody's been saying. But a different one, I'd say that I liked. I would probably go the Seahawks, actually. So I had questions, I think, with Witherspoon and JSN, right? Those are the 2 first-round picks. Because I know they had a lot of defensive line issues. But I like their second-round pick in Derek Hall out of Auburn. I think he fits their system perfectly. They also got Mike Morris. I think they're switching over to a 3-4 more so of. I think Mike Morris is perfect for the 3-4 coming out of Michigan. Kind of fits that, he's an edge, but he's like 290-ish. But he's got a mean streak to him. So I feel like he's good, kind of at that edge spot in the 3-4. So overall, and they also got Owatimi at center, and then Charbonnet at running back, McIntosh as well, who went to Georgia, is a nice pass catching running back. So overall, I think this is another great draft. From the Seahawks last year, had probably one of the best. You wouldn't think about it, but had one of the best drafts in the entire NFL this year. I think this could certainly replicate that with their picks right now.
Yeah, I mean, I like their first round a lot. I think getting the lockdown corner. I know Devon Witherspoon was on a lot of teams wish list. I think in that top 10 range as far as picks went. To get JSN at 20 was kind of a nice player to fall to them at that spot. Just kind of secure their third wide receiver with Lockett and Metcalf. I think that's going to play extremely well in Seattle. One of the head scratchers was just the amount of running backs I feel like they drafted, especially after getting Kenneth Walker last year, who had such an awesome year breaking out. I was kind of in question of whether or not that was the best use of draft capital at those spots. But otherwise, I thought Seattle just again had another good year and kind of builds on the playoff team they're hoping to kind of bring back into the fold next year.
Yeah. No, and one more thing just to add on that is just you walk away with the number one cornerback and the number one wide receiver on most people's draft boards. I'd say that's a pretty good haul. Even if they didn't draft enough, I think, defensive linemen. There's still free agency, I think there's still room for them to grow there. But this is the NFL draft. You always try to go usually in the first round, second round, best player available, and I think they got two of the best in their position. So, but yeah, two running backs. That's always a question mark, but I think at least they complement each other, that running back room. So,
just to insert one quick piece of Georgia bias in here, I knew Kenny McIntosh had a great year, but I saw this stat after he got drafted because he didn't run as fast as I think people expected him to. If he runs in the 4.4 range, I think Kenny McIntosh is a second to third round pick. I think if he runs in a 4.4 range, I think he's Alvin Kamara light. That's how good I think he is. But I saw the stat that was Georgia running backs with 1,300 yards from scrimmage and 12 touchdowns. It's like post Herschel Walker era. So Garrison Hurst, Noshawn Moreno, Todd Gurley, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Kenny McIntosh. That is a damn good list to be on. I'll just say that. Anyway, that's all I got. If he's in the group with that, and you got him in the, was he fifth or sixth? I can't remember, sixth round maybe.
Yeah, I thought it was one of their last picks. Yeah, I think it was their last pick.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, and I'm going to round off this list. Let's as far as the winners go. There's a few teams I've got on my list. I'm not going to cover them. I mean, Arizona, New York Giants, I think both got A+ from PFF. I mean, Arizona probably more so for the draft haul they got, and then filling a lot of needs. New York, I think their top three look pretty solid above. But I'm actually picking a team that I think has gotten kind of dogged and has gotten kind of a mediocre grade across the board from a lot of different analyst groups. But when I sit back and I just look at what they did in the first 5 rounds, I give them like a standing O, because I think for what their team needs and where they're at right now, I think they got a lot of talent and a lot of starters for many years to come. And that's the Detroit Lions. They're in our division. Obviously, this is a very weird year that we're moving into in the NFC North. We've got Aaron Rodgers as a Jet. The Vikings, we don't know if this is Kirk Cousins last year, what's happening with a lot of their premier players from years past. Chicago, we're still in a rebuild. We're still trying to figure out, the building blocks for the years to come. And Detroit kind of falls in this really right position of having a really solid roster and then just kind of building upon it. And they got dogged in their first round because of positional value and positional kind of scarcity or basically like how we think you should draft in the first round. And to me, I mean, they walk away with Jahmyr Gibbs, as their new running back one. I'm hearing a lot of comps too, like you were saying, for McIntosh as an Alvin Kamara type. Gibbs, I think, is that kind of player, and could definitely add a lot of octane to that offense just in their passing game. And hopefully, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Taylor, but just like as far as his ability to rush or get between the tackles, I still think he's probably competent of doing so. But anyways, correct me if I'm wrong there. But so to get a top 2 back, I think off the bat, obviously people don't like that because they don't like seeing a lot of running backs go in the first round. And then to add also the top linebacker as well, and Jack Campbell, guy's got a lot of size, range. Again, gets slammed because it's a linebacker in the first round, but I guess I'm caveating a lot of this because I think in the next couple of rounds to go, Sam Laporta at tight end, who's arguably a top 3 tight end, physical guy, can go up and grab the catch. Brian Branch, who I think a lot of people had in their first round, falls to them as their new top safety. I mean, a guy who can really tackle, probably the best nickel, cover safety in this entire draft as well. And then to go, into the next round and grab Hendon Hooker as possibly, your quarterback of the future. I mean, I think Jared Goff has done a serviceable job with the Lions, especially last year. I thought he stepped up a lot. I think he has 2 years remaining left on his contract. But again, Hendon Hooker was being talked about as being a first round talent. I think he's got the right mix of passing, rushing ability, and, the modern NFL to kind of maybe slot in there in a year or two, maybe learn, behind a guy like Jared Goff and the Lions. But to me, I took a step back because I know, we go through these drafts, we listen to a lot of analysts, we listen to, how they want to put it, their big boards together, and, linebackers will never make the first round, this or that, or, running back going in the first round is kind of crazy in this and then in the other. But I'm kind of like, you just take a step back and you look at the first 5 guys they started their draft off. You can make an argument that these guys are within the top 2 to 3 in their position for their group. And it's just like, I think that's an amazing draft to add on to, this Lions roster who, they grabbed David Montgomery. They ended up, grabbing 2 starting cornerbacks. They've got CJ Gardner-Johnson at safety. They're bringing back Aiden Hutchinson. There's a lot of other, avenues they probably could have gone down with this draft, but overall, I think they've been getting dogged a lot. And I really do like the roster that they're putting together out there. So I'll leave it at that and let you guys, pick it apart for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you, Pat. I mean, positional value definitely is a thing. I mean, I don't mind, I would say, the Campbell pick. I think am more of a critic on the Gibbs pick. I think a lot of people had him going maybe to the second round. And then with Laporta, I would argue that they could have drafted Mayer, I think. I think Mayer was the 3rd tight end taken off, and I think Laporta was 2nd. So I would definitely put Mayer ahead of him there. But I do agree, at least with, I think, Branch and Hendon Hooker. I think those are great picks for them. So to me, it was like a mixed feeling. It was, a middle of the pack type of draft. I think, like you mentioned, people had dogged on them for that. But, if Gibbs can turn out to be, a Pro Bowl kind of player, which I think in this offense, he definitely can be. And, him being a nice combination with David Montgomery, I think that's, it could be a solid pick, but yeah, positional value, I think, is where I get lost in it. But the rest of the picks, I think we're okay, I think. So.
Yeah. That was kind of where I was going. I get your point, Pat, right? If you look at that, you're like, wow, we have quality players that we drafted at each one of these positions. And particularly, I don't know where I land on Hendon Hooker, right? But if you think you can get a guy who can be a starter in the NFL and you can get him that late, that's a good risk to be able to take, right? If he pans out, that's huge. I think my issue with it is kind of around positional value, right? Just from the standpoint of, if nobody else is going to pick that guy, do like the Cardinals did and just trade down and get your guy, or like the Patriots always do, right? Like, we got our guy, we don't want to pick him before we need to, so we'll just trade down and stockpile 4th, 5th, 6th round picks and still get the guy we want. Just because I feel like if you're picking a middle linebacker, in my opinion, in like the top 20, I'm like, that guy better be like Luke Kuechly or something, that's middle linebackers that go in the top 20. And maybe this dude is, I don't know a ton about him, but just kind of reading about it after, it was like, oh man, that was a stretch. Which is different than what we talked about before, where it's like, if you're an edge rusher, like, you disrupt the game, right? I mean, look at that. That didn't Micah Parsons went like 10th overall. It's like this dude, is going in the first round. Granted, maybe that's an unfair comparison because Micah Parsons would be a top 2 pick if he was going in the draft now. But and same thing with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think your comment around, I do think he can run inside the tackles, right? He's not just a guy you can split out, which there is a ton of value in being able to split out a running back now, right? Like if you can't catch the ball, you don't have near the value that you do if you're kind of multi-dimensional like that. But I don't know, man. I think Gibbs is really good. I'm curious to see because I feel like, I don't know, Gibbs, I don't think he's like Alvin Kamara's level, but I think he's like closer to like a James Cook in my opinion, and probably a little quicker than Cook laterally, who was a second round pick last year. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We can all like talk about it like we talked about, but it remains to be seen on the field. But I'd agree with you from the standpoint, if you just look at like the people that they got at key positions, it's like, man, you got some good quality players. But the other thing I think, and maybe this is unfair, is that like, I'm like, well, you had DeAndre Swift, and I know there was a lot of like swirl and just like kind of bad blood on the team there. It was like probably better for both parties just to get rid of him. I'm like, okay, well, you just picked a guy. Like, is Gibbs a huge upgrade over DeAndre Swift, right? Like, is that a massive upgrade? And I don't know if it is. I guess it remains to be seen. But
yeah. So I think my takeaway, I think the points that I do agree with is, let's say Gibbs for most folks was like, okay, this is definitely end of the first round or nearing second round. Same thing with Campbell. We're thinking top of the second round, something like that. Maybe they could have moved back, got a little bit of extra draft capital, and then went out and got their guy. I kind of just, again, like when I look at the players, the first 5 they took, what if we took Branch, who was supposed to be a first rounder, and dropped him into the Gibbs slot and then moved everything back? Like, do you have that same reaction as like this Lions team, like had a terrible draft? I think a lot of people get, too fascinated with, again, like picking the right position for, the slot itself versus like what talent are you actually bringing back there? Because do you want the 4th D end or you want the first, linebacker, let's say? I don't know. I don't know which player, if it's Jack Campbell or if it's Miles Murphy, who's going to end up being the best, NFL player at the end of the day. But I feel like this kind of happens in fantasy drafts a lot, where it's like, hey, I got to go out and get that tight end, because once they hit that tier of the last of the 3 or 4 good tight ends, like I'm screwed. And sometimes you go out and you reach for that 4th or 3rd tight end, and it's like, at the end of the day, why didn't I just grab that, wide receiver who is, top 10, top 15 talent? It's like, I would have been a better team. So I get all the points. Like, fair enough. I'll take the hits, everything like that. But no, when I just look back and I just saw the talent, I was like, to me, I think those are a lot of gamers in there, and like they're already stacking on that Detroit team, which I think is going to be the team to beat. And that's a big statement coming from somebody who's followed the NFC North as long as I have, probably Wayne too and stuff.
Yeah, I think if I were the Lions, I probably would have picked like, I don't know. I think by then some of the D linemen were gone, maybe Christian Gonzalez or something like that, because I know their quarterbacks in the secondary, I think they're all gone with 1-year deals. So, maybe a Christian Gonzalez might work there. But no, fair point. I think, Branch, he was, I think, the number 1 safety, I believe, in the draft. So, if he went in the second round there, like, why not switch him up? I think he had a 1st-round grade for some of these other analysts. So, yeah, it's definitely a we'll see. I think kind of draft for the Lions there.
All right. Well, I guess we can turn to, maybe, if we don't want to call them losers, we'll say head scratchers. But why don't we start with Taylor? Was there any teams that you just didn't really get it?
Well, unfortunately, Pat, I think the Lions would have been my team. And the beauty of the draft
Fair
is
enough.
you don't ever know, until like years down the road. But I'll take your question in a little bit of a different direction, because I was going to mention it before, but I don't want to take it down the side road. The thing that I find fascinating about the draft, and I'm going to twist your question a little bit, is that like Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Like, I think it was a consensus kind of second overall back in the draft. I mean, here's a guy who is from the state of Georgia. I think from what I heard in recruiting, kind of wanted to come to Georgia. There's only so many positions you can take for running back. He goes to Georgia Tech. He does very well. And then he transfers to Alabama. And it's like, is Jahmyr Gibbs still looked at the same if he went to Georgia Tech and graduated from there? like I'm just fascinated at how much like a bit of a crapshoot like the draft is, in the sense that like we look at these guys and it's like this is their career and their scouts. It's like, well, how do you miss on all these guys who we take like oftentimes in the first round, and then there's other dudes that end up killing it and they're undrafted free agents. I mean, I saw when that Dalton Kincaid guy, the tight end out of Utah, they were like he wasn't even getting much playing time until like a number of games into the year, and now he's the top tight end overall taken. So I'm like, I'm just fascinated by that, both from the evaluation standpoint and how often they miss, and also from like an opportunity standpoint. So you're telling me, I think he got more playing time because somebody got hurt or something. It was something random like that. It's like, so you're telling me if this guy didn't get hurt, like he would have been like potentially like undrafted. And then the other side of it too is like 2 years ago, Spencer Rattler's the number 1 overall pick. Like, is he even drafted next year? You know, like, anyway, I'm just fascinated by that aspect of it. I know I took that a different way because I feel like we already covered who my loser was, which is the Lions. You made me think about it though with the Jahmyr Gibbs pick though. It was like, man, it kind of is a bit of a push for people who are at a different school to say like, if you can go to a bigger school and highlight your skill set, and like you're playing for Bryce Young and they're gonna be the focal point. There's gonna be more scouts and like more bigger games that go into an Alabama. Like, how many rounds did Jahmyr Gibbs move up just by transferring to Alabama? Anyway, I took that question in a completely different direction. I thought it was something that was important. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I feel like I didn't know what track you were going on with the comment itself. Like, does the school ultimately give you some more cachet to be a bigger prospect than if you were to go to a mid-major or somewhere else? Like, I think that's what you were saying. I almost look at it like I was kind of thinking about Ohio State and quarterbacks, because it's like everybody just wants to equate, Ohio State with producing like some terrible quarterbacks. And I feel like, so a guy like Justin Fields comes out, or even a guy like CJ Stroud, and quickly people are to jump on like them for being, an Ohio State product. So instantly, like they lose a little bit of credibility. They're not going to be, they're not going to be good pros as quarterbacks and stuff. So I think at times maybe just the judgments that we come with as far as like this program for this type of position or this type of player, like it matters way too much when we should really just be looking in between the eyes or the combine or what we've seen on the field and tape and stuff like that too. If I've got you right.
No, for sure. I mean, I guess I would say another one would be like Texas Tech used to always have these prolific offenses, and it was like, oh no, you can never draft a Texas Tech quarterback. And it was like, well, what about like now there's like Pat Mahomes? Has he dispelled that myth? And like there's there's more truth to the bad Ohio State quarterbacks than there probably is even like Texas Tech, But anyway, yeah. I won't hijack that and take it a different way. It was just something I thought was interesting without kind of replaying the Detroit one. But I don't know, Wayne, I'll let you take the same question that Pat gave in terms of like, who's your loser in the draft?
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I think that's a good take and everything. But yeah, my loser, I had several ones. I was questioning things a little bit, but I think for me, I'll have to go with the Jets though. I think they drafted Will McDonald the fourth, who was projected to go like maybe late or early second, late first, but the Jets were kind of mid a little bit. So that was like one pick I thought was a little bit of a reach there. They also got Joe Tippmann, center guard, I think in their second round there. Fair value, but nothing exciting. I'm not too sure if it'll help them in the long haul. Maybe they add him in there. He does have some positional versatility, which I like. So I know they have Aaron Rodgers, so that I think that'll help. Maybe it's not a sexy pick, but I didn't find it too alluring there. And then they also got Warren, I think, out of Pitt as well, and then the running back. I can't pronounce his last name, but Israel from Pittsburgh there. So those picks were okay, but yeah, the Will McDonald one I think was the one that was like, I don't think it matched the value there. I know they're edge rushers are definitely a hot commodity, so they're probably looking to move on from I think Carl Lawson, right? So, but yeah, didn't feel in love with that draft. Yeah. So, but what was yours, Pat?
It's our team from Chicago. I I didn't like the Bears draft whatsoever. Honestly, I want to talk about this more. Wayne, you were there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But in general, man, just to kind of go to our pick, we get to number 9 and the player we've been talking about this whole offseason, everything that we've been, kind of wanting. The reason why we thought we could move down from 1 to 9 safely and still have a chance was to get Jalen Carter. And to me, I think this guy is going to be an absolute game breaker. I think he's going to be, the best inside interior defensive lineman for the years to come. He found the perfect spot, I think, in terms of what happened in this offseason versus like what kind of team do you want to walk into? You got old friends there. You've got veterans. You've got a team that just went to the Super Bowl. For all those reasons, Jalen Carter will probably be, even a tick better than he would have if he, went to Chicago. But for me, it was just such a lukewarm feeling just to kind of be in that spot at number 9 and then to see the trade pop up. And, we move back one spot. We get a 4th round kicker. I mean, I would like to think that there were other teams in that first round that would have traded up to get Jalen Carter besides Philly. So we dish him to Philly, who's the defending NFC champion. We're trying to build a thing. We're trying to get there. They've got Jalen Hurts in a lot of years to come. And it's like, we just handed over the pick that they wanted. And it's like, in return, we get a tackle. We get, one of the top 3 tackles. I like Darnell Wright as a pick there. I think, could we have moved back much further to get him? Probably not. But in the same sense, like, why didn't we just get Jalen Carter and then maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round go after, a guy like Tyler Steen or a guy like DeJuan Jones? Because for me, like, you're just picking Darnell Wright to be your right tackle too. He's not your blindside tackle. He's not, the leader of your offensive line. Like, I think you could have gotten the value maybe you wanted or maybe a tick below, in the 2nd round or so. And for me, that set the tone for the entire draft, because then at that point, now we're chasing, the defensive lineman, the defensive tackle. And it's like, we go Gervon Dexter, who's very raw, had probably a 65 grade on PFF. Zach Pickens from South Carolina also had a pretty low grade. He's a better pass rusher, they say, in terms of interior defensive linemen. Tyreek Stevenson seemed to get kind of, mixed reviews. They say he's a good cover corner. He can play on the outside, but he's a below grade athlete. Noah Sewell, same thing. Terrell Smith, like, they lack a lot of agility, just being able to cut as linebackers and cornerbacks and stuff. I mean, the only upside I took from this draft, like, at least from like, besides Darnell Wright being like a solid choice, is, maybe the upside of a Roshan Johnson from Texas. They said he was blocked by, Bijan Robinson, but has a lot of explosiveness as a running back. Perhaps he pushes both Herbert and the guy we got from Carolina, Foreman. It's possible. And Tyler Scott, they said, is a very physical, former running back that's been converted to a wide receiver from Cincinnati that may, be able to fight for balls, give us some good kind of downfield type playmaking. But, to me, it just felt like another Bears draft, another Bears offseason of like, great, we went out and like picked the right position at the right pick, but we didn't get the top player at that spot. And again, that kind of goes back to my Detroit stuff. I know we're going to kind of have a good laugh about it. It's going to be funny watching this back and stuff. But like, that's the problem that I have is like, we just went to sell out for the tackle, because if we didn't get that tackle in the first round, the fan base would have said something about it. But in general, I feel like you take Jalen Carter there, you've just bought yourself a couple extra years as GM of the Chicago Bears. But just my take.
My question on that, Pat, is do you believe Jalen Carter succeeds with the Bears as opposed to, where he is now with the Eagles?
I think the talent alone will speak volumes no matter what jersey he's putting on. I think that if he can get over, and I don't know Jalen Carter's character. I don't know his mental makeup. I don't know how resilient he's going to be to, drag racing in the offseason, perhaps witnessing a friend of his pass, and in the same sense, like show up to the combine, probably, reeling from everything that happened with that and kind of showing up out of shape and not putting his best effort. Like, do I think he's going to be a better player next year because he's on the Eagles? Like, hell yeah, because he's going to be supported by one of the best, defensive lines and linebacking crews and secondaries in the game. And, they're a great organization. Like, they'll find a way to kind of fit him in at the right spot. With the Bears, he would have been, carrying the torch for that entire defense. And, we still have a long way to go to make that, I think, a respectable unit, just depth wise and experience wise, veteran wise. Like, we still need a lot of, I think, talent on that end. So he would have been carrying a lot of weight, but the top player on the big board for the entire draft fell to us at number 9. And we just said, nah, no, thanks. We don't want him here. Like, NFC defending champs, you guys can have him. Just give us a 4th rounder. We're fine with it. So yeah, to me, I thought it was a bunch of crap, but it's like, I don't know. I just had very mixed feelings about everything we just went out and got. And I don't walk away thinking like, man, we've got some like fixtures here on either side of the ball for years to come. I'm just more or less like, I really hope Darnell Wright is what everyone's talking about, because if he's not, like, this is a pretty crappy draft in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll come in on the rest of the drafts, and then I'll let you, Taylor, jump in on Jalen Carter a little bit here, and maybe would he maybe be a better fit, or would he fit into any team necessarily, regardless of these things that happened in this past and all that. So, but with regards to the Bears drafts, I don't mind Darnell Wright. I think he was, we needed a right tackle. He fits our scheme, fits our coaching attitude, fits our organization's attitude as well. So, and I don't think he actually gets past the tight ends. I think, the tight ends got Peter Skoronski, I think, who is, slated maybe more so as a guard, but definitely has some tackle upside. So I think they draft him. Being, he's from Tennessee, he probably has a hometown type of a feel for him there too. So the rest of the drafts, I kind of agree with you on. They didn't address edge rusher. I think was my biggest thing. And now they're going to have to go through free agency. Maybe that was the plan all along, getting, Yannick Ngakoue, or, maybe Chase Young, I think is another name that's being thrown around. So, but Gervon Dexter, a lot of question marks there. I think he was actually rated coming out of high school higher than Jalen Carter. So definitely has the upside there, but never showcased it on film, the pass rushing, right? So I think that's the biggest question. Pickens, yeah, it's definitely a question mark there as well. Stevenson, I think I like more, but, we had a trade a pick to get him. I think that was my biggest thing over there. And I think we could have waited back and either got him or maybe someone of equal value there. So, but I did like the at least Roshan Johnson pick, and it was a Tyler Scott pick as well. So I think those two will be key contributors, I think, for the team. But yeah, to your point though, with regards to Jalen Carter, I just feel like I think with Ryan Poles, would I have taken Jalen Carter? Maybe. But I think, for them and what they're feeling, I think Darnell was probably their safer pick more so.
The Bears definitely picked like the high school recruiting all-star team. I was thinking back to that list you were saying, like Darnell Wright was a very highly rated recruit. You said Gervon Dexter. I know he was a high, at least 4-star, if not 5-star. Zach Pickens was a 5-star. Noah Sewell, who's Penei Sewell's brother, was a 5-star. Tyreek Stevenson was like a super high 4-star guy. Actually played 2 years at Georgia. I don't know if you guys realize that, and then transferred back home to Miami, which is where he's from. But yeah, to answer your question, Wayne, was around, and I think you were alluding to it earlier. I can't remember one of you guys had mentioned, like, is Jalen Carter this year for the Eagles the same Jalen Carter that would be there for the Bears? I don't know, to be honest. Like, I think there's been a lot of stuff that's come out. I think some has been warranted. I think some has not been warranted. Like, am I saying that everybody's drag racing and that's okay, and it shouldn't be like he shouldn't be reprimanded for that, or that shouldn't be like a judgment on his character? No. But like, he didn't, like, if that accident didn't happen, right, are we really talking about kids speeding and racing against other kids? Like, name a college program now with NIL where you're driving these 600 horsepower vehicles where nobody's racing on the road, right? I'm not like justifying that behavior, but like 20 years old. I mean, hell, if we were in that position, are you saying that if you pulled up next to me like at 11 and we're revving your motor, that I'm not going to like, at least try to take you for like 100 yards right out line? Anyway, so I do think that I think that some of it's been overblown. I think that when I look at Jalen Carter, the thing that blows me away is like he's a big dude, but he's not like a freak athletically from a physical standpoint when you look at him, right? Like when you're on the field, his strength and stuff is like it's unbelievable. But you see him and he kind of just looks like this like a little bit like pudgy, honestly. He doesn't look like a dude who's like a beast, but he is. And so it makes me wonder. I just don't know that I've seen his body progress in a way that like somebody who busts their tail in a college strength program would, because I think he has the talent that like if he put a work ethic together with his talent, it's like it's not out of the realm to say you're like you should be Aaron Donald, JJ Watt type of player. Like I mean, he is extremely talented. And I don't know if there's any truth to it. You know, you hear like rumors about what's come out, and there's like people talking about the Georgia coaches wouldn't even endorse him. I think that might be overplayed a little bit. You start to kind of pick at little comments that you hear, and apparently like our offensive lines coach said like when he wants to play, he's unblockable. And it was like, or something to that effect. Like when he actually like really goes hard and gives effort or something. It's like, wait, are you saying that he doesn't always give effort during practice? So when I see guys like that, and I'm like, you go to a team like the Bears where they need to plug you in and probably play, and you need to be the superstar. I do think there's a bigger risk of you kind of failing, right? You're probably playing more downs. You don't get the opportunity to get your feet underneath you. You're moving from being kind of coddled in a college environment to going to the pros. Like these are big steps, you know? Nobody's telling you to show up at study hall. Nobody's telling you to show up at practice on time. Like you got millions of dollars and like it's all on you now. I think when you go to a team like the Eagles where like you're sitting behind Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, who are two veterans who have done it forever, right? And then you're sitting there with Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis and like Nolan Smith. Not only were they teammates, but also like from an outsider's perspective, like super high character guys. So when you put him in that environment where like he doesn't have to produce right away, there's veteran leadership. There's also other leaders who you played with for multiple years at the college level. Yeah, I absolutely feel like it insulates him from having to be the focal point. I mean, gosh, what is Jalen Carter like in terms of people you want to see on the Eagles? He's probably somewhere from like, is he like the 10th most exciting person on the Eagles? Where would he be on the Bears, right? He's like top 3 dudes you want to see. Maybe number 1 after Fields, right? And so I just think that it does create an easier environment for him to like grow instead of having all that pressure immediately. So it's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, can you tell us more about like what makes Jalen Carter actually special? I mean, there is kind of some of those waves of doubts, but like, what do you actually see in maybe his technique or, you know, what have you, that'll just kind of carry over to the NFL game? And one other thing, like, what do you think of Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean at the NFL level, now mixing in Nolan Smith, Ringo, Carter? Like, how do you think that'll all kind of play out in Philly?
Man, yeah. I'll take your second question first. I think that it goes back to my comment that I made earlier about the rich getting richer. Like, Nakobe Dean's the Butkus Award winner, right? He didn't even have to like start, and from what I saw, didn't play that much last year. Jordan Davis is, you know, behind 2 awesome defensive tackles, right? So just have to like have the ability to sit there and kind of learn. Nolan Smith, his draft comparison was Hassan Reddick, who was on the Eagles. Keely Ringo is probably going to sit there and be behind like Darius Slay. I mean, look at these players that these guys get to sit behind. They're like Pro Bowl level. So when you can come in at like in your 2nd or 3rd year, like, yeah, man, I just feel like they are, and like not just in your 2nd and 3rd year, but like, oh, now like, oh, I'm so glad if I'm the center on the whoever the Eagles are playing that like Fletcher Cox went out. It's like, well, now you get to deal with Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis who are fresh, right? They're not playing multiple downs. You can put them in on like, you know, in whatever their specialty is. For Jalen Carter, it could probably be anything. For Jordan Davis, more of like run stopping downs. So anyway, you keep them fresh and you allow them to learn behind guys. Yeah, I just feel like they're stacked. But going back to your first question, which was what makes Jalen Carter special, you know, like when you watch people's highlight tape and there's like maybe like 2 highlights in there where you're like, oh my God, he did that. That is Jalen Carter's entire like highlight tape. I mean, one of the analysts was saying like they were watching a game and it was like you could look like 15 plays in a row and like that could be his highlight tape. And it was literally just a continuous segment from the game. I mean, he makes it's everything, man. Like, you look at one guy and you're like, oh, is he like the D tackle from Pitt? I can't remember how you pronounced his name. He's more of a quick off the ball guy, right? Not going to be a 2-gap player. Like Jalen Carter, you see him blow through people and have an incredible pass rush. And then you literally just see him on it was like against LSU on like 4th down. They're going to run the ball. And he just puts their tackle on their ass and like hits the running back in the backfield. It is like, that's a turnover. That's a turnover on downs. Like from a defensive lineman position, you are making game-changing plays. And the guy can just do it all. I don't know how he's so quick and powerful. I mean, there's a reason why they're like, he's the best D-tackle prospect in like since Quinnen Williams or whatever. The guy's everything on his tape. I mean, when he was out, I can't remember if Tennessee was the first game he came back. But, that was a huge game with Georgia and Tennessee. Tennessee actually just moved up to number 1 in the country. And here's Jalen Carter, like, I just wanted to say Dobbs. It's not Dobbs. Hendon Hooker went back to pass, right? And here's Jalen Carter, like, strip sack in the end zone. It should have been a safety. They ended up giving up on, like, the 1-inch yard line, or the 1-inch line. But when you make plays like that, man, it's like there's nothing like it. When you can, like, create turnovers, you can rush the passer, you can – yeah, I don't know. There's just – I don't see any holes in his game unless you're saying that there is an issue with his work ethic. And even if there is, if that was there in college and he still did that, can you not just limit the number of plays he plays and still let him just, like, unleash him on, like, 60% of the defensive snaps? Because the guy is just a grown man amongst boys, but yeah.
And that's why the Bears had the worst draft. So – That's it. That's my mic drop right there. Thank you, Taylor.
Watch his highlight tape, man. It is freaking insane.
Oh. Do you think he makes the Pro Bowl, multiple Pro Bowls with the Eagles?
I don't think he'll make it initially. I mean, I think the Eagles are brilliant, right? Because if I'm correct, and I thought I heard it during the draft, that both Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox are on like 1-year deals. So if you feel like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are ready, right, you still got those 2 dudes on rookie deals, so you can spend your money elsewhere. And if you think they're ready to plug in, well, then maybe you let Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox go. So I think it'll be dependent upon how quickly he progresses. If they feel like they're ready, I mean, I would lean towards yes, Wayne, just because – maybe less around his talent, which I obviously, based on what I just said, think he's very talented, but more from like, how are you going to key just on him with all the other defenders on the field if you're the Eagles, right? And stacked on offense. Like, you can't just, hone in on one guy and say, we're going to stop Jalen Carter. If we can control Jalen Carter, we can do whatever we want on offense. It's like, well, no. They're loaded at linebacker. They're loaded at other positions on the D-line. They're loaded in the secondary. So I just feel like when you plug in a great player and he's amongst other great players, like everybody eats and everybody thrives, compared to if he goes to a lesser team and he has to be the man, maybe you can neutralize him. But if Jordan Davis is next to him, are you gonna put 2 guys on Jalen Carter? I don't know.
Should be fun to watch. I mean, anybody who's in Philly, I got a good buddy out here, Mark, who loves the Eagles, and I was texting back and forth with him at the draft too. Just my sheer disappointment, my sadness. I could not believe, when they actually traded down, what was actually happening, because I got so high for like 5 seconds and it just came crashing down. But as a Bears fan, you grow accustomed to this kind of feeling, and it doesn't last too long. So, anyways, just wanted to go one circle back around with everybody. If you wanted like any takeaways from the draft, things you enjoyed, or picks, or whatever else, a team that made some other good additions or what have you. Just why don't we start with Wayne? Any takeaways?
Yeah, I think the one pick I loved and I got excited when I heard it was when it was the first pick of day 2. It was Joey Porter Jr. going to the Steelers. I was thinking, about his dad and everything, but I had like a first round grade on him. I think I had the Steelers taking him with their first round pick there, and they ended up, over beating whatever pick or draft I had there. So, they had a great draft. They got Broderick Jones there as well as Joey Porter Jr. I think both those players are going to start probably immediately, honestly. So I think just having that experience, Joey Porter Jr. there, and I think Tomlin coached his dad too, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So I mean, how about that? I think that's an incredible story there.
Yeah, they also grabbed Darnell Washington too. I think that got some high praise, and there might have been some other good picks they got later in subsequent rounds. But I know they had probably one of the better drafts of all teams.
Yeah. They got Washington third round, and they also got Benton. Was it Herbig from Wisconsin, and then it's like Corey Trice, who I think like some people had him third round, fourth round. He went to like seventh round. So Steelers got all the steals, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like for me, Pat, it'd be, I guess, two things. The story down in Dallas, kind of to your point, Wayne, about just having cool storylines was when Deuce Vaughn, the K-State running back, got picked by the Cowboys. I thought that was super cool with his dad being a scout on the team. Super cool to see that. And man, you just look at that too from a on the field standpoint. I feel like those small dudes that are super productive in college, they kind of end up being super productive in the pros, right? Particularly at running back. Like Darren Sproles, and I don't know, like there's just a lot of those small guys. Austin Eckler, like around now, like they just produce. I think it translates well. They're not going to get drafted high because they're on the measurables. So that would probably be one. And the second one, man, I had to come back around on this because I was like, I don't know, man, I might even draft CJ Stroud over Bryce Young. And I think I've been like a victim of the commentary around like Bryce Young is so small, and he is small. But man, I think I'd just forgotten how good he is. Like I remember, seeing him play on TV too, and then in addition to that, like when I was fortunate enough to go to like the national championship game, I've never seen anybody be able to throw with like the timing and the accuracy and the anticipation. It was unbelievable. Like if Bryce Young was, 6'3" and 215 pounds, like be no doubt that, he is the man. I just think that sometimes like is it something that we need to look at and say, yes, he's a little small and should that be a consideration? Yes. But like when you turn on the tape, the guy just is unbelievable. In the biggest moments, he just gets better. I feel like he's going to be very good, and particularly in a place like Carolina where they haven't had a good quarterback in a while and really needed one. I came around on that pick, I will say. When they first did it, I was like, you give up your best receiver and the Bears are loading up on picks, but like Carolina's got some pieces in place. They were like 7-10 last year, right? If you put Bryce Young in there, that's a huge it's almost like the wins above replacement stat in baseball, right? Like that's a big leap from the quarterback spot. They could easily go 11-6. That's only a 4-win improvement, So that's probably the one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works in year one. I mean, the Bears hold their next year's first round pick. So in a lot of ways, getting DJ Moore back from them, I think is a huge boon for us. And then I think we went after Foreman. We started gobbling up Panthers, and I was like, is this just like a route to take in order to like make sure they're like the worst team in the like league next year, just so we can, up the value on the pick or something. But Wayne and I have definitely gone back and forth on Young versus Stroud. I'm more the Stroud type, and love to hear your thoughts on Stroud too. But like, I agree with the talent that Bryce Young may have. I just I do worry about size and durability, and I think he was injured in college, but I just don't know a lot of 5'10" quarterbacks that have reached like elite levels in the NFL for years and years. I think Kyler Murray, Doug Flutie. I'm trying to think of like other guys of his stature that could like actually, maintain their health, but also just to kind of like outcompete all the other top quarterbacks that have been, in the league and kind of taking up, franchise spots with other teams too.
Yeah. No, for sure. Do you want me to address that one?
Yeah, fair game. I just want to hear your take on Stroud.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that Stroud for me, it's stuck in my head because I'm like, he should have kicked the shit out of Georgia in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. I mean, the guy played the game of his life, right? I just don't know how much I saw him play outside of that. But yeah, I mean, he's ridiculously talented. And I think that for me, like, I'm not going to say you can't go wrong because quarterback, there's just so many variables in play. I'm not going to say you can't go wrong with those two, but those two are clearly 1A and 1B. My issue is more like after that, I felt like there's a huge drop. Like, I don't know. You're getting into the underwear Olympics if you start thinking Anthony Richardson is like a top 4 pick. Like, yeah. Anyway, it's a separate conversation probably, but I'm like, what are you doing, Indianapolis? Like, yeah.
How about Levis?
So you'll like this. What my Will Levis comparison is Mitch Trubisky.
Oh God.
I just feel like he's that guy who was like super talented, but it's like you had opportunities to prove it at like a mid-tier program in college, right? North Carolina and Kentucky, probably relatively similar, right? Not that top tier, but one down. Everybody knew you were like supremely talented, but you never actually proved it on the field. And then you did well in the combine, and it's like, this guy is amazing. And it was like, but you had the opportunity. It wasn't like, oh, the starting quarterback got hurt and he only played 6 games. And no, like you were a multi-year starter at Kentucky. You played 2 full years. Hell, you got beat out at Penn State by Sean Clifford, who wasn't even that good. So you went to Kentucky, but you never actually showed out there. So at some point, like, you can have a rocket arm, but like, that's not the NFL. Like, NFL is like, what's up here, you know? Yeah, I don't see it in either one of those guys, to be honest. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but and he's in such a better situation too, I feel like, with the Titans. But yeah, so maybe you will work out, right? If you're with the Titans and you're sitting there and you're handing the ball off to Derrick Henry and not as much as expected of you, maybe that lends itself for you having a more productive career than, you know, if you're CJ Stroud and you're probably going to be starting day one, people are going to be like, oh, he sucks. And it's like, well, who's he throwing to? Who else is on his team? And I just hope people have patience, right, when you draft a guy that high. But yeah, I'm not sold on Levis or Richardson. I'm more in the camp of like, you know, here's the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft, huge drop. And then it's like, well, shit, if you can get a Hendon Hooker, or you can get, honestly, like, I don't know, maybe to a lesser degree, even like a Stetson Bennett later on where you're not risking that much, right? I don't know, man. That Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, it's like you're getting enamored with the physical traits, but did you actually watch the tape? Because if you can pick up a quarterback in like the 4 to 5 range, there's just not any risk there. If he doesn't pan out, it's like, who cares? I'm almost in this camp of like, he's either top 10 or like go 4 to the 5th round. But that's just me.
Yeah. I think the whole Richardson thing, I wonder if that came from ownership a little bit, because it's like, I think the fan base just got tired of like getting 35-year-old quarterbacks or something like that and inserting them into that roster, which is talented, but, you know, I think they needed some young people. You know, he's going to have at least he might not start immediately. I know they have Gardner Minshew, so if I'm them, I'm like, you know, wait like 8 games or something like that and see, you know, get him familiarized with the system and professional life, and then maybe insert him in there. But I mean, that team's, I think, you know, a little bit too talented in there. I think their window's closing, so I don't know. But yeah, I do agree with you. I didn't see too much from either of them. They were just had really great combines, so.
You know, and if it doesn't work out, he can try out for wide receiver, and you know, I'll be in the books from there. You know,
that guy could be a tight end for sure.
Yeah. This is kind of my takeaway. I don't know if I have any players to really point out in specific teams or anything like that, but I guess, you know, looking at the Philadelphia model and just how they've started to like gobble up as much Georgia talent as possible, I started scanning around at other teams and just kind of going through each team's draft, and I found these trends kind of funny. But like Detroit, for example, in their first handful of picks, grabbed a couple of Alabama guys, a couple of Iowa guys. You go down to the Chargers, they grabbed not only Quentin Johnston, but Darius Davis and Max Duggan in their draft. You know, 3 TCU guys. Minnesota, first 2 picks, 2 USC guys, 2 LSU guys to follow. And it's just kind of like, is this trend, like, is this something that's been around the NFL, and it'd be, you know, something you probably have to look back at and kind of see like which team started like developing these trends, but like, is this going to be like one of the next trends of, you know, drafts to come where it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to go out and get Quentin Johnston, but I'm also going to grab that quarterback that he connected with. Like, maybe it creates that camaraderie, in the clubhouse, or maybe it's something, they can, get the best out of both of those guys at the pro level too, just by having them, having worked together for so long, or just known each other's, strengths and weaknesses too, that they could share with coaches or something. But like, do you guys take anything away from that? Like, I don't know. I was just scanning down the board, but, just seeing what Philadelphia has been able to assemble there and how logically sharp it comes off as, like, do you think that has any merit for any of these other teams too?
Yeah, I'll take it. No, I definitely think it does. I think it's especially important when there is a high upside player there. You mentioned Quentin Johnston, and then Jalen Carter, right? Having that support there. So with Johnston, having that his college quarterback to point out, oh, you did this in college. Why didn't you do it here in the pros, right? Things like that, I think, are good call outs, and that can certainly also pertain to Jalen Carter, right? It's like, hey, Jordan Davis, you remember me, right? Like, why am I doing all this stuff wrong? You having that accountability partner, I think, can be really important for, again, like a player that just has all the talent in the world, but just maybe needs a little bit of some construction, I think, from a friend of some sort. So I think that's good. And it certainly helps too if they fill a need. So I think that's kind of what they're looking at there. And, we definitely see the Joe Burrow and Chase, Jamar Chase type of tandem there. I think that definitely set kind of a precedent for all this a little bit more of, but I definitely see that probably being more of a fixture, I think, in future drafts.
Yeah, I was kind of going to go multiple things here. I guess one would be that's a great example. I didn't even think of that one, right? When you have guys who are coming out in subsequent years, right? Particularly when it's a quarterback receiver combination. I mean, if you're Joe Burrow, you're the face of the franchise. If oh gosh, why did I just draw a blank? Jamar Chase is anywhere around the top 10 pick, and Burrow's like can vouch for him and say like that's my guy, and there's a connection. Clearly, that has to play into it to some degree. I was going to say maybe a little bit less though around like the specific team that you mentioned, Pat. I do think there's an element to like GMs coming in, and maybe a little bit related to what we were talking about earlier, and like championship teams and like cultures at the college level are going to get more visibility, right? And so I think naturally, like if you're a scout, where are you going to go to? Are you going to go scout people from like, I don't know, what's a mid-tier program that might, are you going to go to like a bunch of games at like Mississippi State? Well, maybe some, they probably have some good players. Or are you going to go to like an Alabama where it's like, we know there's like 10 to 15 draftable guys here. So they're naturally going to get more eyes on them. And I think when they're around that more, they see what the culture's like. And I think that they want to draft people who come from that kind of like championship DNA, that they're familiar with the way that Nick Saban does things and can probably relate to. I think that's probably one of it. I don't know that that means that they're going after specific guys from one team, but I don't think it's a coincidence that you see like teams that win are going to have more guys drafted, right? The flip side of that, though, then I was thinking, I'm like, well, hell, the best dynasty out there ever is the Patriots, and they're picking people from like the middle of nowhere. And in the draft, they're talking about like their board only consists of like 70 guys. I don't know if y'all heard that comment. They're like, their board is only typically like 70 guys. Like they don't even rank the rest of them because they're like, they don't fit into our scheme. And then they're picking this guy from like North Dakota State. And you're like, who the hell is that? And the guy's a freaking like Pro Bowler somehow in like 3 years. So it just blows up my whole theory of what I just mentioned. But yeah.
And no, it is honestly crazy you mentioned the Patriots, because that was the flip, like the flip other side of the coin, kind of like the flip side opinion. Because I was like going through these teams too, and I looked at the Patriots and I'm like, well, they don't do it that way. So like, but there's got to be there's like a madness to kind of their methodology there, and it's like it seems to have obviously worked for them over the years. I mean, they obviously had TB12 as well, but no, it is kind of crazy. I just acknowledging that and kind of seeing like, is that a good strategy, or should you just go for the best talent or best fit out there regardless of affiliation to a certain university among the draft picks you already picked. But anyways, we'll end it there for the NFL draft. The takeaways, the winners, the losers. I guess we can just go around with some final thoughts. Really anything that's on your mind, but we can start with Taylor.
Oh man, you stuck me with this one, man. I wasn't prepared for the final thoughts. What do I got? What do I got? Shit. Um, I don't know.
I
I
can
guess
go
my
if you want.
final thought would
Oh,
be, I think the last time I talked to you guys, I just started like our podcast. Maybe we're like 2 or 3 episodes in. Um, and I was probably just now getting to this point. I just think it's super cool. You guys have probably been down the same path and can speak to this too. It's really interesting when you just like take up something, right? And like we were talking about this a little bit before of like you can only get to like 60% of comfort and then you just got to like make the leap and you get more comfortable kind of swimming in the deep end. I think that like with my podcast, and I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing, and I probably benefited from being on your podcast, just getting so much more comfortable with like putting your voice out there. And like it's so empowering, you know. I know you guys is a little bit more lighthearted because it's like sports related content and stuff. Mine's kind of more around like personal growth and stuff. But regardless of whatever you're talking about, I think it's so empowering, you know, to know like, man, I'm not afraid to put my voice out there and other people are going to see me on YouTube or hear me on Spotify or whatever these other platforms are. And it's like, I'm good with that. It builds this like confidence in you that I just thought that I was like, I never would have thought that it did that for me. And it's kind of cool because you just stop caring what other people think because you're like, I can be authentically me. And people can be like, hey, your personal growth podcast is terrible. Or most people are like, hey, we like this because it's family and friends. But it doesn't even matter if people like it or not. It's more just like, man, I get value out of this. And in a society where I feel like we're, you know, a lot of people are like constantly looking for like external validation, just doing things that you do for the love of it and not trying to like get some sort of financial gain and building that confidence in yourself is like super cool. And I just didn't expect it, but yeah.
yeah, no, I agree, Taylor. I think for me at least, it's like it's really cool. For me, it was actually great for professional development. Uh, I used to be working a lot with like clients and doing presentations and things like that, and on my laptop since we're all working remotely. So for me, it was great to see and like kind of practice like the lighting and how to make eye contact with a laptop or computer and things like that. So that's one component, but I think more so to what you're going at there. I love sports. It's something I'm passionate about. I read the newspaper when I was a kid. Like I would look at the box scores of of last night's Major League Baseball games and things like that, and read all read all the latest things and all the other fun stuff there for sports. So I think it's awesome when you can do that for things that you have a great knowledge of, or with personal development. I don't know anybody that doesn't like any type of personal development podcast. So I think that's great, and it definitely does a service to the world. I think for for helping people out through their own situations, and I think it also helps yourself out too. For me, sometimes it's nice just to talk about things that's on your mind, whether maybe they're good or bad or whatever. So I think it's kind of like its own therapy in a way. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback off Wayne's 2 points too, because I feel like for the first part, I didn't even know this was a benefit, but just being in a rhythm of being so vocal and getting your like true, genuine feelings out there, it does carry over to different parts of your life, like in your work life, in your personal life, like just the ability to kind of stand up and be able to have a point, back it up, defend it when it has to be defended. But it's like, it's just nice to get in that rhythm of expressing yourself, because I think, in today's era of communication, it's like a lot of social media, it's a lot of texting, it's a lot of, DMing and stuff. And it's like, we're not picking up the phone and calling each other anymore. We're not getting together to have lunch, or, we're not going out to the bars as often to have a beer, whether that's just because we're a little bit more grown, the pandemic, distance, whatever it could be. So this is always kind of like a safe spot and like a nice place to just continue to practice that. And didn't go into it with that intention, but I came out of it with some of those skills. And I think the other point he brings up is just like the love for sports. And like, I was that same kid, Wayne. Like I'd go out and pick up the Chicago Tribune, and back in the day we had 8 channels. I had WGN News for sports. It was a 20-minute segment. We didn't have Sports Center, so it was like I would just sit there and stare at all the box scores, read about every single player on every team, look at what they did for the day, and then go outside and like play some wiffle ball and stuff. And like, that was me growing up. And it just, so to carry that over 30 plus years. And now it's like, when I have a thought, I read about sports, I read about, stats, I do fantasy, I do all this, all that and stuff. I listen to podcasts, and it's like, I just want to have a voice in this space too. And I want to be able to express myself the way I want to. And it's just so fulfilling to be able to do that every single time we go live here. So good points overall, guys.
Yeah. And if Skip Bayless can have a voice out there, then I feel like we can, so come on.
Fair enough. Wayne, your final thought?
My final thought. When I went to Kansas City, I said to one of my friends that I went to Kansas City with for the draft, at Arthur Bryant, actually, I had one of the best side dishes possible out there. I had the best ever coleslaw, actually. So it wasn't too like watery. I know like some KFCs or whatever, sometimes their coleslaw is just so watery and just so moist and just dripping wet. But theirs had that perfect balance, I felt like, of like you can actually taste the coleslaw itself. And it worked perfectly in combination with the spicy sauces that they had and the barbecue, the briskets, etc. as well. So I guess, maybe quick round robin. We'd love to hear from both you, Taylor, and Pat. Maybe not what your favorite coleslaw is, but what's your favorite like salad or something like that? What do you like to put in your salads?
Can it be like non-traditional?
Sure.
All right, I got two. What's that Asian salad? It's got like some nuts and stuff in it, and actually has like crunched up, like it's almost like ramen noodles in there. It's got like a sweeter sauce. I'm gonna have to look this up and get back to you. I can't remember what it's called, but it's really good. It's almost one of those cheat salads. Like you're talking to somebody in the South, Wayne. So when you say salad, that's like if you go down here. I was at a restaurant, Pat, this Lizard's Thicket in South Carolina. Like they're like, I'm eating 3 veggies, but veggies are like mac and cheese and like, I shit you not, one of the veggies at the end of the menu was Jell-O. So when you say salad to a Southerner, Wayne, you just got to be prepared. We will like put a piece of lettuce in like a hamburger or like, I can call that a salad. Anyway, so that would probably be one of them. But then the other one would probably be like just one of those salads that has like goat cheese and like some kind of like cranberries or something. I just love that combo, man. That is like, so good.
Yeah, that's my favorite combo too. I would say goat cheese and like a cranberry.
With like nuts or something, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I want to comment on coleslaw because in Chicago, if you ever go to the north side, go to Fish Keg. It's a kind of a fish market. They do like flash frying for any sort of breaded fish, any breaded chicken that you want to buy. And you have to get everything by the pound. And you can do cold shrimp, cold fish as well. But they have the best coleslaw that I've ever had. And I never, ever thought of myself as like ever wanting to like coleslaw because I feel like it was always that side that just came with like your sandwich or a burger and everyone like instantly throw it away because it's always kind of trash. But I think the thing they did really well was a vinegar-based coleslaw. And I'm not as much for like the creamy coleslaw with mayo and stuff like that, but I do think like you get a vinegar-based coleslaw. I even make it at home now sometimes, just chop up cabbage and you'll get celery. You can get celery seed as well, kind of drop it in there, carrots as well, but then kind of mix it up with a good vinegar or red wine vinegar, some olive oil. And like, it's very simple to make, but I just think coleslaw with barbecue, with other heavier sides, heavier proteins is just like, I don't know. It's a really good breakup. It like really kind of helps clear out some space in your gut when you're going hard on some barbecue. But salad wise, man, yeah, I'm pretty good with like, I like arugula with feta. I've got this garlic vinaigrette that I always buy and I really enjoy that combo. It's very simple, but it's very good. And then Cobb salads too. Like a hearty, chicken, boiled egg, you've got bacon bits, some blue cheese, maybe. I'm a big blue cheese guy. So I think like that's always a good taste too on some mixed greens, but yeah, man, nowadays we can't just roll through the fast food, establishments every night. We can't eat barbecue all the time. So like salads are definitely a staple in my diet. And I definitely try to mix it up as much as possible.
Yeah, sounds good. What's your take?
Oh man, guys, I had to do a double, triple take the other day at the grocery store. I mean, this is the part 3 of inflation series here for final thoughts. I mean, I've done a Costco one, done a TB one. Now, I was walking through, the aisles, getting the staple items, and I had to do a quick grocery run before I came home. And for some reason, I just kind of passed through the liquor aisle. I mean, I wasn't really intending to, but it just so happened that I found myself in that aisle or what have you. But I look in the cold case and I turn to my right, and I see that on sale for $33.99 was a 12-pack of these seltzer vodka seltzer cooler drinks. And I just like looked at it for a good like 20 seconds or so, and I'm like, they're honestly trying to charge $34 for 12 cans here in the middle of the the burbs of Virginia. And they actually think that people are going to grab this, go to the counter, add tax to it, take that home and enjoy it. I mean, it's like, I don't know, man. It's carbonated water with maybe a thimble of vodka in every can. Like, it just blows my mind, some of these prices and like what, liquor companies are kind of aiming to do. So I think part 1 of this final thought is just, love to hear some reactions about that itself. But then I also want to ask a very hard question for you guys here, is that, do you think men should be able to drink seltzer in today's, sports, dining out environment with other dudes and not be judged for it? And if so, if you're okay with it, what seltzer product is your favorite on the shelf right now as far as hard seltzers go?
You going, Wayne, or are you going to go? Oh, he's on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah. So I agree with you that dudes should be able to drink hard seltzer. I think that is essential to survive in this world of becoming fat with all the barbecue. I think that I'll be consuming for the rest of my life. So no, I think it's cool. I think this whole like you have to be a man in order to just drink hard beer and stuff like that. Like, yeah, if it's good, it's good, right? I think that's if I'm enjoying myself, I don't care. Like, yeah, whatever. If the commercials are just a bunch of like, I guess women just dancing around, or it's kind of the same thing as like a Budweiser commercial, anyways. Anyway, I definitely will subscribe to drinking your hard seltzer, and I won't have any shame for that. So, but my favorite one, probably Topo Chico. They have like a pineapple one that I usually like to get, and I think it's great for the summer. I think it kind of fits that vibe a little bit. So I'll go with Topo Chico. Yeah, pineapple. Also like a lime that they have as well, but that's usually my go-to.
I hadn't had the Topo Chico like hard seltzer. I've had just like regular carbonated water. Actually, I've become a big fan of what, I don't know if this is common, but they apparently came up with a name for tequila, lime, and Topo Chico. It's called ranch water. Yeah, which is delicious. But back to your question, Pat, I think that I don't know all the seltzers out there, but I got this variety pack of the Corona seltzer, and 3 out of the 4 were delicious. But you got to be careful because the 3 were delicious. I don't even remember what the flavors were, but I remember that 4th one that was terrible. It was like a coconut lime, and it was just like way too sweet. I mean, typically in a variety pack, it's like to the point where you're like, no, I'll drink that one tomorrow, until you got the 4 that you don't want to drink, and then you drink them. This was almost like undrinkable. Like it was that bad. And it was like such a contrast from the other ones that were delicious. But yeah, and to your first question, I absolutely think people should be able to do whatever they want to do. Like I don't need to prove my manhood to be able to like slam shots. If I want to drink a Corona, whatever the Corona seltzer, like, or if I don't even want to drink at all, like, do you stop worrying about what other people think, like it's the damn society we live in, like, which is also funny, I know you're but like, oh, are you some big, strong, manly man because you like slam whiskey? Like, I don't know, it's just a funny thing in our society, I feel like.
Yeah, I do like girly drinks, quote unquote. So like every time, like oftentimes I'll go like on a date, right? And I'll order the girly drink, but then all of a sudden, like the girl I'm with, she orders like a shot of whiskey or something like that, and it's like, well, hey, Who's paying for dinner? Are you going to pay for dinner? Like, for me, it's like, whatever. Yeah, I agree with you there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just funny. I remember when seltzers were first getting kind of like popularized, and I think I was talking to one of my buddies from back home or something, and we were with like a group of our friends or something, and me and the other guy were just talking about seltzers, and like it just became the butt of the joke, at the time. It's just like, how like, every piece of manhood was stripped from me just in that conversation, talking about seltzers and drinking them. But I think they've become so mainstream now, it doesn't even matter. But I mean, even to the point, I mean, it's like whatever you like, and it should be fine. But I just find it funny in like our culture, like we do have those like, I guess manly items or manly things that we must do to kind of like, affirm our manhood. And like, if we ever stray away or, try something that, could question that or something, I feel like it always kind of, becomes a rib or becomes like a part of a joke in a bigger group. But anyways, I like High Noon. I think that, the further I can get away from synthetic artificial type tastes and flavors, the more I end up liking the product. So I like simplicity. I feel like High Noon, it just has a crisp taste. I mean, it's got, I think it's 100% juice, but in general, it's just like, it just doesn't give me those vibes that like the Bud Light seltzers do, the Seagrams do, the other ones do. I've tried a lot of them, but yeah, so I'd say High Noon. But to this point of like crappy drinks too, seltzers wise, if you guys have ever tried the Bud Light holiday packs, I mean, the ugly Christmas sweater box that I once got was a mix pack, and I think it had like gingerbread and like plum and candy cane and chocolate something was in there, and it was so cringeworthy. Like the whole pack was cringe, but like there was a part of me that was kind of like, well, it is the holidays, like this is kind of like, it's kind of fitting the theme a little bit. So as much as I hate this stuff, like I'm actually kind of enjoying choking it all down. So I don't know, just more or less funny to me. But yeah, anyways, go seltzer, go men that drink seltzer. We stand behind you. And yeah, so I'll end my rant there.
Yeah, real men drink seltzer. Let's make that a thing.
But anyways, great to cover the NFL draft. We're so happy to have Taylor Moss back in the house. Just so you guys all know, the podcast he was referring to is The Constant Quest. He's been doing a lot of different sessions covering different points of personal growth. His partner and special guests have been great up to this point. So go on Apple Podcasts, The Constant Quest. You'll find it. Subscribe, like, comment. Do the same thing as well for Ball and Breakfast Podcast. We're obviously on YouTube here, so give us a like, a subscribe. Feel free to weigh in on any of our picks. Pick us apart if you feel like it. And we're also on SoMe on Instagram and as well on Apple and Spotify too on podcasts. So with that, with Taylor, with Wayne as always, I'm Patrick signing off for the Ball and Breakfast Podcast.